Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Before the Bald Man Speaks. I'm your host, Andrew the Clown Kid Lawrence, coming to you live after UFC 202 and a decisive Conor McGregor majority victory, taking it with scores of 48-47 in two cards and a 47-47 tie over one Mr. Nathan Diaz, helping me break down all the action from the night's festivities. He's the man, the myth, the legend. You might know him as the Twitter handle Best Fight Picks, or you might know him from a little show we call Half the Battle, taking over YouTube. It's the man himself, Daniel Levi. How you doing, brother?
Doing amazing, man. I mean, oh my God. I think Carlos Condit and Robbie Lawler are going to have to hand over that Fight of the Year title because Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz stole the show, dude.
Yeah, this fight, I just finished saying to you, has the ability to be ran over and over again and will always have a spectacular result. What I think was most compelling about this fight was that it was very different from the first fight, even though you could, from the surface, if you just looked at the results, like the round-by-round action, how it flowed, you could say it was very similar. But I thought what was really interesting was just how much Conor changed his game up. He was, attacked a lot with the leg kicks. I thought that Conor McGregor also had a much better stamina. And interestingly enough, I thought Nate Diaz had worse stamina. But nonetheless, I just think that this is a infinitely fascinating fight in that you could watch it go over and over again.
Yeah, well, firstly, Conor McGregor did pace himself, like you said. And, he wasn't throwing at air as much. He wasn't headhunting like he did in the first contest and, throwing a bunch of random spinning kicks for no reason. He was very precise and methodical with everything he threw in this contest. And then after around, the 1.5 mark, that's when the cardio started to kind of play a little bit of a toll. Even though, like you said, Diaz wasn't in the best shape that he's ever been. He's still a triathlete, so he still has something in the tank. That's when he started to take over. But unfortunately, in the championship rounds, he wasn't able to seal that deal in that fourth round, and he ended up getting outpointed. But you know what? Props to McGregor for going up 2 weight classes. I know people say, look, Diaz is a lightweight. It's true, he is a lightweight. Mm-hmm. But let's be honest here. He didn't have to cut those 15 pounds. So if they were to do the rematch at 155, one could make the argument that the same shot that dropped Diaz tonight could have knocked him out at 55 with that, 15-pound weight cut. So, but then again, it comes down to who just joined our chat. You see that?
I have no clue. I didn't get that.
Kick his ass out. What's up,
already
Liam?
Been ejected.
Yeah, he's gone. Yo, but yeah, what was I saying? Sorry, I just lost my train. My.
No, it's completely understandable. You were talking about the weight class difference. You were talking about how 170 wasn't really 170, but in reality, he doesn't have to make that cut. Maybe a couple of those shots that dropped Conor, or rather that dropped Nate Diaz, would have put him away at 155.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And honestly, another thing, those leg kicks, finally, Conor's not known for being a leg kicker. He's known for being a spin kicker. So it's always been a strategy to use against the Diaz brothers to kick their legs. Kind of like who showed that? RDA showed that against Nate. So Conor employed that strategy, and he picked his shots with his strikes. And then it just came to a battle of hearts towards the third and the fourth round, which Nate won. And then in that fifth round, Conor just kind of ran away. And I guess Nate didn't have the gas to put him away.
Yeah, I think you could definitely, look at the fight like that as, Conor McGregor correcting his energy management issues. I would also like to say, and, Flying Brian's been bringing it up on Twitter before we went live, he was saying, Conor dropped Nate a lot. So he was much more effective with his power punches this time. And I think that whereas in the first fight when he was hitting his left hand a lot, he was landing it, but it seemed like Diaz was rolling it. I think in this fight there was less of a lunging motion. At the end of all those punches that were just kind of grazing Nick Diaz, or Nate Diaz rather, in the first fight, it seemed like Conor was really overextending and not throwing really technically great punches because he wasn't used to that range. And I think that bringing in all of the people that he did in this camp, the taller, lengthier fighters, actually paid a lot of dividends in that there was 3 knockdowns in this fight, and they were all pretty clean, and I think they were all left hands from Conor McGregor. So I don't think we can overlook that when we say, hey, this was a close fight, this was a split decision. There's also 3 knockdowns for Conor McGregor in the fight.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You know, last time he made the comment that he was inefficient with his energy. This time he was efficient with his energy. But, you know, at the same time, it goes back to the conversation about the weight. That's why he kind of gassed out a little bit towards the end, in my opinion. Because if you go back and you watch his fight with Holloway, he had zero issues in that third round. But here, you know, I really think, you know, dude, this guy shouldn't be fighting at 170. Let's be real here. Drop to 55, drop to 45. But, hey, he's got a brass pair on him, right? We got to give him respect for that.
Absolutely. I'm less inclined to think that the weight class had much to do with this, as much as I think it was just stubbornness, and the first fight was naturally the short, the short notice nature of the fight allowed or made it easier for Diaz to request that, and I think Conor was accommodating because he doesn't think that there's much of a difference there. The stubbornness to have it at 170 was always an interesting part about this fight, but I don't think a defining characteristic. I think we can look at this just like we would look at as if they had fought at 155 pounds. I'm not too interested in seeing the trilogy fight happen now. I'd love to see both these fighters kind of go their own way. I am glad that it was a close fight so that there is interest in a third fight, because let's be honest, that's Nathan Diaz's probably last great payday of his career. I don't foresee him having another matchup in a Conor McGregor like character who's going to, bring in the dollars.
Yeah, I mean, well, firstly, did you see that Conor got $3 million just to show? Just to show. So that means that, he could have taken a
no win bonus
after the first second of the fight, said fuck this, and he would have walked away with $3 million. And Nate, he was guaranteed $2 million. Now you got to factor in the pay-per-view points, the sponsorships, this and that. Those two got paid very handsomely. And as far as the rematch is concerned, I hear a lot of people talking about how, Conor needs to go back and defend his title. And yeah, I agree with you, but let's not sit here and act like the previous champion, Jose Aldo, was defending his title regularly, because he wasn't. And the biggest complaint about him was that, he never fights. So now all of a sudden Conor wins the belt, back in December, which wasn't that long ago. And now everyone's saying, he's run away from the division. It's like, dude, give him credit. He just moved up 2 weight classes to fight one of the baddest men in the UFC. And he knocked out Aldo in 13 seconds. Like, what else does he have to prove? There was the Frankie Edgar question, but, Frankie, to quote Conor McGregor, got the head slapped off of him for 25 minutes. So, at this point, I honestly wouldn't mind seeing, I know Cowboy called him out, and that would be a good fight too, but I wouldn't mind seeing Conor McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez.
For the 155-pound strap, I think that's a no-brainer. If Conor decides to take a true 155-pound fight, it absolutely has to be for the belt. It's just the nature of the Conor McGregor show. It needs to be that big. It needs to be a spectacle, especially after this win against Nate Diaz. It kind of locks that into place. I'm not too concerned about seeing him necessarily defend his title at 145. There's a lot of fun things that we could probably do 145 in his absence. We could do Jose Aldo, Max Holloway, and we could basically act like the UFC 145-pound interim belt that Jose Aldo has is the true 145-pound belt until Conor decides to make that one final cut. Because I really see him making this cut maybe 1 or 2 times. But before I toss it back to you, I do want to note, it is a goddamn travesty that we're never going to see Frankie Edgar against Conor McGregor. It's a fight that it makes so much sense stylistically, and I think favors Frankie Edgar far too much. But it just spelt fireworks all over it, and I really hope that someday we work out a way that fight gets made.
My only comment on that is never say never, because just because Frankie Edgar lost his last fight doesn't mean that he's not going to go out there and smash his next opponent. And you know what they like to say. You're only as good as your last fight, right? Jose Aldo comes off the embarrassing 13-second knockout loss. Everyone's writing him off. All of a sudden now he's in talks to fight Conor again. That's the conversation. So as far as I'm concerned, you can pick yourself back up in this sport. Everyone's taking embarrassing losses. People were saying, how is GSP going to come back from that Matt Serra loss? Well, they came back to be the most dominant welterweight champion in UFC history. So it is possible, and I would not write off the possibility just due to the fact that it's such an intriguing matchup.
Yeah, definitely. I know exactly what you mean. But then let's, you make an interesting point. Let's look at it from the other perspective. What about, Nathan Diaz? How much shine does he lose off of losing this fight? It's a very close fight. I think it's a lot of people are going to look at this fight, and the Diaz fans are going to concoct some way that he won. Maybe give him the second, the third, and the fifth round. I don't see that argument. He did get knocked down a lot. He did get hurt a lot, but I mean, I think it's clear at this point that the Diaz charm is not dependent on being victorious 100% of the time.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. It doesn't matter if he won or if he lost this contest because, for example, one of my buddies I had over, he was rooting for Conor McGregor from the start, and he gained so much respect for Diaz based on how much of a warrior he is. That was his quote. Wow, Diaz is a warrior. I mean, how can you not respect that guy? So whenever you watch a Diaz brother fight, unless they're fighting some fucking boring wrestler that's just going to hump their leg, it's a fight you're going to remember. There's a reason that he's among, the top 3 record holders for the most post-fight awards. And that's because he always comes to fight, man. And when he's in shape, that's when he has his best performances. The Michael Johnson fight, the Cowboy Cerrone fight, the first Conor McGregor fight, even though he wasn't in the best shape, that was still a great performance. And then tonight, even though he was on the wrong end of the decision, that was still one of the best fights of all time. And that's what the fans remember.
All right, let's change gears a little bit, ask some serious questions. This fight is big business for the UFC. It's a money mover. It's a major spot on the calendar for the UFC as far from a fiscal standpoint. Let's ask the heavy-hitting questions. How much money do you actually think that Ido Portal takes away from this fight purse?
Well, firstly,
there's a lot of flowy out there tonight.
Artem was nice and flowy tonight.
Artem threw a kick. Did you see that shit? He looked real smooth throwing that kick.
Oh, yeah. And
sorry, time out real quick. Listeners, please, hit me up on Twitter with the hashtag BTBMS with your victorious Artem Lobov haikus. Craft a haiku celebrating Artem Lobov's masterpiece victory, and put it on Twitter for us. We'll read it on the show. Continue.
Interestingly enough, his game plan against Avila, it kind of was a precursor to what we were going to see with Diaz and McGregor, just in terms of the leg kicks. That's all I'm referring to. It was a very low-level version of Diaz McGregor, right? Just even though Avila's not a southpaw and this and that. Look, what I'm trying to say here is that
yeah,
Artem utilized the leg kicks effectively, and so did Conor McGregor.
Yes, absolutely. That is very true. So Ido Portal, he gets to stay on for another training camp.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Hey, I never answered your question. So, I mean, all these dudes have a percentage of what they get paid, and I would imagine that, what, is 5% too much? Because don't you got to pay – I'd imagine you got to pay your manager 10 to 20. And
he's not clearing $150,000 for pool noodles. I say he's getting a nice salary. He might be getting 60 G's.
I'll tell you what, John Kavanaugh with his new book out, he's laughing to the bank.
What's the Irish version of the New York Times bestseller? He's on it.
Yeah, exactly. Might even be on the New York Times bestseller. I see all these people tweeting about it. I'm like, win or learn. I mean, I thought the cover of that book was a Photoshop job. Where I come from, it's called win or lose, but because what are you saying? You don't learn from your wins too? Look, if you're a perfectionist and you go out there and you win, that doesn't mean you should be satisfied with your performance. That means you should pick out all the things you did right, think about all the things you did wrong, and correct it for next time so you can come back better. So essentially, what he's saying is, I don't learn when I win. I only learn when I lose. It's making an excuse, but I get it. It's a marketable phrase, and props to him for his success on his book. Damn, you looked way too much into it. You need to just accept and just say, it was a cash grab. Once you got the Conor train going, everyone's got to get there. Everyone's got to get a touch. It's really smart of Conor to get some alternative revenue sources, get his boys making their own money instead of leeching off his money. Smart business going on down there in the McGregor camp. They're pretty sharp guys. No doubt about it.
Anthony Johnson beat the goddamn brakes off Glover Teixeira. Didn't even really beat the brakes off him, just kind of 1-2 hit him. A couple hammer fists later, and it's all she wrote. The only true KO victory of the evening comes in 13 seconds of the first round. Jesus Christ, Anthony Johnson, scariest 205er, maybe scariest fighter in the entirety of the UFC.
Yeah, I mean, what else is there to say? Actually, there's a lot to say. I'll go on record and say he will knock out DC in the rematch. Woo. And then I'll take it one step further. Anthony Rumble Johnson is going to be the guy to dethrone the great John Bones Jones via knockout.
Holy shit, that is a hefty prediction. It's late at night. People have been drinking. You're not going to be held accountable for this.
Well, let's put it like this. I have not been drinking, maybe been having other ways of fun. But the bottom line here is that, look, no one escapes this game without taking that first L. Everyone has to take
Everyone
it.
Takes the L eventually.
It does not matter who you are. You know, it doesn't matter if you're Anderson Silva, GSP, fucking who are some other great fighters. You know what I'm saying? Conor McGregor. It does not matter. The MMA gods don't care who you are. This fight game isn't about all the money you have, the cars you drive. It's about fists and kicks, elbows, knees, chokes, takedowns, and whoever has the better night that night is going to get the win, and that's the bottom line.
Yep. Anthony Rumble Johnson's just a guy who's extremely scary in those first 2.5, maybe even the whole entirety of the first round. You come in like Glover did, and it wasn't even such a small opening or such a huge tactical error. I feel like, you could say that he rushed in, but it's fighting. You're going to duck in and try to accomplish some offense at some point. You can't sit there for 2.5 rounds in a shell, because Rumble's going to beat through that too. So I don't know what you do to solve the Rumble Johnson problem unless you're some physically gifted freak like either DC in that you could take the punch, or John Jones in that you can have the length to kind of pair him away. I wasn't even sure if that can happen.
Dude, you bring up such a good point. Okay, because look, so Glover's plan was to stand and bang with Rumble and I guess maybe take him to deeper rounds. So on one hand, you can think, all right, what happens if I stand and bang with Rumble Johnson? I get knocked the fuck out. Then on the other hand, you can think, what happens if I shoot for a takedown right away when the fight starts so I can avoid standing and banging with him? Then you see the Ryan Bader fight. Doesn't work, man. So what you have to do now, John Jones has a path to victory because he's the longer guy. He moves. He throws those oblique kicks. But his biggest problem, I don't want to, it's how can I criticize one of the greatest champions in UFC history? But what I would say is what's been so great about him, but what could also be his demise is the fact that he likes to beat guys at their own game, and he's very good at doing that. He out-wrestled DC. He outstruck Glover. He outstruck Shogun. But you don't stand and bang with a guy like Rumble Johnson. So he has to have the smartest game plan of his career to win that fight. And in my opinion, like I said earlier, I think Rumble's going to be the guy to do it.
Yeah, I think you definitely have a point that it's very possible. I think without a doubt fans agree that it's the fight that we're most curious about. Unfortunately, John Jones is stuck in that problem where he's ran through so much competition. I think, all you need is a guy who has like the quintessential puncher's chance. But if you look at the resume that Rumble Johnson's putting together, it's not simply just that. You're looking at a fighter who's very confident, has a very good idea of spacing, can fight off that back foot, which we saw here. I think, very well also in the Bader fight. Now, what wrinkles will John Jones bring into that fight? Probably a lot, and we know that is, kind of one of his keys to victory is being unorthodox and bringing a different, very unique game plan to nearly every single fight. So, will Rumble be the guy to dethrone, John Jones? I'm not 100% with you to commit to that, but I definitely think that it's the compelling matchup to see, even more so than John's DC or even DC Rumble.
I mean, let's put it like this. Sorry, I know you're about to move on, but let's put it like this. I do not think that John Jones can take that punch that Glover took tonight.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of guys can take it. Now I know DC took a very good shot and he went flying across, the octagon and then back. But different guys are built differently. Even though John Jones beat DC, John Jones is a tall, skinny guy, and those guys are notorious for getting knocked out as opposed to the shorter, stockier guys. So I'm not sure if that punch, if he could come back from it. I know he's got the heart to, but if your lights are switched off, it doesn't. No amount of heart can save you. So it's about John Jones not getting clipped with that shot in the first 7 minutes. But hey, if John Jones takes that to deep waters, he's known for drowning dudes, and he could very well tap out Rumble Johnson. But if you're making a pick, Rumble's going to be the guy to do it.
Yep, definitely. He's the only hope out there on the roster. I think you can clearly say. Let's rewind before we talk about the. Yeah.
Hey, sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Besides Nikita Krylov.
Besides the GOAT himself, Nikita Krylov. Before we move on to the rest of the undercard for this fight, I wanted to rewind and talk about the main event a little bit, just because there's one thing we didn't cover, and that's, was there anything technically that you saw Conor McGregor do in that he, in a different, what did he do different in this fight to accomplish what he needed to? Was it simply the conservation of energy, or did we see different techniques utilized by Conor McGregor? Takedowns clearly weren't a story in this fight. There was quite a bit of clinch fighting, but there was quite a bit of less fighting at that far away range that I think we saw in the first fight. And I think that Conor McGregor actually, tightening up and being more successful in the traditional boxing range, and kind of, edging Nate into what he thought was going to be the boxing range early in the rounds, or in the early rounds, and then ending up delivering that outside leg kick. I think those were some technical points that Conor clearly changed up his style, and I don't think we saw too much changing up of style for Nate Diaz either. What did you think about the corrections and the new styles that were brought forth in this fight in the main event?
Well, there's a lot of things. Firstly, like you said, Andrew, the utilization of the leg kicks, that's big. Because if you think about Conor's UFC debut, he fought a guy that was 5'3" in Marcus Brimage. So, and when he beat Aldo for the title, Aldo's 5'7". So Conor's used to fighting as the taller guy. And there's a way to fight like a taller guy, and there's a way to fight like a shorter guy. So the first time he fought Nate Diaz, he tried to bully him like he does to all the guys at featherweight, and that's not the proper strategy you're supposed to use. That's the reason why he was swinging all those air balls and spinning, kicking to to nothing. But tonight he fought like a short guy, and that's why he won. He utilized the leg kicks, he picked his spots, and the cardio went from time to time, but he got a second win towards the end of the fourth round. And I think that's what carried him through. You could make the argument that Diaz won based on, the times when Conor was running away and this and that. But the early rounds, when Conor was fresh, just the precision, the timing, it was beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, these ideas that Conor McGregor preaches sometimes ring a little hollow with me, because then you watch him fight, and especially in the Nate Diaz fight, there's always this talk about flowing and, being a flowy fighter. And, then you see this guy winging serious effort punches and straining. I thought we brought back kind of more of the flow to Conor McGregor's. And what I was very interested in seeing is we saw hardly zero Taekwondo from Conor. You could say it in the low kicks, but what I mean by Taekwondo is kind of the spinning shit that Conor used to do, the hook kicks and all kind of axe kicks and ridiculous things like that, where I think are very effective when you're the bigger guy, and not necessarily as effective when you're fighting a guy who has 2 inches of reach on you.
Yeah, exactly. Like we were saying, man, he fought like a short guy tonight. And that's what you got to do against a dude like Nate Diaz, man. But you know what? Nate's such a goddamn warrior, man. I mean, to show that heart he showed, a lot of guys, when they got dropped like that, they could have turtled up and let the ref intervene. With him, I don't know if you noticed that one time where he smiled and he's like, "Come on, dude, come into my guard. Let's see what's up. And he had no problem getting back up, even though he had a very injured leg. I mean, the Diaz brothers are such warriors, man. But props to Conor McGregor for overcoming, such an embarrassing loss, such a deflating loss, and to now, prove a point that, not just can he beat the guy that beat him, but he also answered other questions that, people say that true champions can go all 5 rounds. Well, now Conor McGregor went to the championship rounds, and he proved that, hey, I can go all 5 with one of the toughest guys in UFC history. So I think he gained a lot of respect in a lot of people's eyes, because I know a lot of people like to shit on McGregor because, the problem with a lot of these fans is that they can't separate the outside the octagon with the inside the octagon. For me, it's about how do you fight? I'm just a fan of martial arts. So when I see a dude driving a fucking nice car and wearing a nice suit and talking a bunch of shit, that doesn't really bother me. I'm entertained by that. Look, if you say something if you cross the line and start saying some racist shit, then I'll be like, all right, yeah, I'm not a fan of this guy. But all the other, the shit talking is no big deal. I'm all about the fight. And tonight he proved that he is a real fighter and not a front runner.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to second that too. The Conor McGregor you see in the cage almost seems to be an ideal martial artist in that he's very creative and he's a person who can actually put his personality into his fighting style. That's a rare talent, and I think that it's appreciated by a wider demographic of MMA fans than we actually think. I think that that's something that kind of translates into mainstream viewers. People like it when people fight like the people they are. And the person that Conor McGregor is in the cage is actually quite respectful, I think, and is a person who really understands martial arts and honors the tradition. I understand that outside of the cage is such a vastly different person, and the media personality and the hype machine has become such a thing that, you almost can't acknowledge this underlining respect that someone like Conor McGregor probably has for everyone who trains in the martial arts. And that's unfortunate in a way. I'll ask you this about Conor McGregor, and then we'll move on and we'll talk about the rest of the card, and we'll cover these other fights in a little bit more prompt of a manner. Conor McGregor, he loses his fight to Nate Diaz, gets the revenge at the same weight class, not too far after it. Does this bring Conor back? There was a big narrative going into this fight card that the buzz was down and that there was less excitement involved for this fight card than had been for 196 and would have been had it been in UFC 200. Huge result for Conor McGregor, a massive fight, just a fantastic kind of classic fight, maybe fight of the year candidate. Does this put him right back on top? Does this make him the mainstream star, the fighter to beat in MMA right now?
No doubt about it. Because look, not only did he come back and win, I mean, do you remember when, of course you remember, when GSP lost to Sarah? So he loses to Sarah, his stock drops, then he comes back and beats Sarah, and then he goes on to become the best welterweight champion of all time. So it goes back to that example, man. And now I think he's going to be bigger than ever because he overcame that adversity. Look, true champions are measured by, how they respond to when they fall down. What was that quote that Fedor said? It's not, I know you remember this shit, after his fight with Werdum, he had this fucking quote about, it's not about how you fall, it's about getting back up or some shit. But bottom line, that's what Conor McGregor is showing here.
It's probably much more scary sounding than that if it was Fedor.
Well, it was the Russian lady translating, so...
I've promptly ignored every single Fedor interview because the dude doesn't speak English. He's probably the most motivational person in the world. Beat the shit out of him. It's way bigger than him.
Here's the quote. It's like something like, the man who doesn't fall doesn't stand up, or some shit like that, bro.
Real Russian, real manly, really doesn't make sense once you break it down. Perfect. Thanks, Last Emperor.
Translation, I like hard punch. But I mean, like, dude, yeah. I think that Conor, I think even though a lot of people won't admit it on Twitter and they'll continue to talk shit, I think deep down they gained a respect for him tonight because he showed that he can overcome adversity in a fight. He showed that he can beat a guy that humiliated him in front of millions of people. and he showed that he can go all 5 rounds. Because a lot of people like to call him a one-round fighter, a plan A fighter. So what happens if your plan A doesn't work? And tonight, he I don't know what necessarily his plan B was, because it's not like he took him down or anything like that, but it was his composure that carried him through the fight. So I think he grew as a fighter, and we got to give a lot of respect to Nate, because even though he took the L, I mean, you can't help but admire a true warrior like that. You know, I think both of these guys are going to go down in the UFC Hall of Fame, no question about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that while finishes kind of get put on your highlight reel and could definitely make an instant star, a legacy fighter, a Hall of Famer, someone who endures in this sport, those are kind of settled and determined in these 5-round wars that you see. So it was absolutely vital, I think, for his long-term legacy, for Conor McGregor to be in a war like this. I think it's absolutely fantastic that Nate Diaz was the person who gave it to him. I want to see the trilogy fight, maybe not now, but maybe in 2-3 years down the line. Look to see Nick Diaz get a rebound fight and an easy fight to win, just to build that hype back a little bit. Then maybe he challenges for a 155-pound belt. A lot of options for both fighters here. We'll stop talking about the main event and move on to the rest of the cards. If there's anything anyone else listening live wants to hear or wants to chime in, you can hit us up on Twitter with the hashtag BTBMS, or you can hit the Google chat and just drop a question into the chat.
Hey, how do I check out this Google chat? I want to see how much shit they're talking about me.
Yeah, I wonder myself. Hold on, let's check. You have to drop it in the questions. Maybe I'm too much of an idiot to actually look at them. So if there's funny things happening right now in the chat, someone hit them up to me.
I think I'm the idiot here, but you know who looked incredible?
Yeah,
Donald Cowboy Cerrone.
Absolutely. I was one of the people guilty of kind of supporting Rick's story. The line here opened up at -180 on Rick's story, closing at a 145, but going as low as a -125 for Donald Cowboy Cerrone. So a little bit of a dip, and then some smart people cashed in late on the value on Cerrone. I was responsible for some of that downward trend. I like Rick's story. I thought that Donald Cowboy Cerrone was eventually going to come and encounter problems at 170, being undersized, but it seems like he's filling into the weight class really well, and he carries his power. And against a guy like Rick Story, he just seemed to be more offensively well-versed.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is what I tell everyone with Donald Cowboy Cerrone. If he's not fighting a top 5 guy, he's going to win the fight no matter what. He has an 100% rate of beating guys that aren't ranked in the top 5 of their divisions. And Rick Story's not a top 5 guy. So it is what it is. We'll watch him lose his next fight to a non-top 5 guy, right? And prove that theory wrong. But, I mean, dude, he's, a 30-fight veteran? I mean, it is what it is. Like, he just doesn't lose in these spots. Never does. But let's talk about the improvements he's made in his game. Something that's really cool about him is that, everyone always criticized him for his lack of head movement. Well, his last 2 fights, he's been moving his fucking head. So credit to Brandon Gibson for, improving that area of the Cowboys game. And today, not only did he show his striking, which he is known for, but he was the one that took down Rick Story. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Rick Story is the wrestler. And also, Rick Story is known for his big pressure, throwing big hooks, swarming dudes, getting them against the cage. I thought that Cowboy had expert footwork. When Rick Story would come close, Cowboy would throw that nice push kick, keep him away. And he just, once again, had a masterful performance. So as far as what's next for Cowboy, I feel like he could take another great fight at 170 because he truly is a contender in that division. But a money fight would be Cowboy versus Eddie Alvarez because they have history together. Cowboy whooped Eddie Alvarez in the 2nd and 3rd round of their contest. And now that Eddie holds the belt, think about a 5-round fight between those two.
Yeah, I think that's a money fight. If the Conor thing doesn't materialize at 155, I think it's the no-brainer move to do immediately. I know that he doesn't have a win streak necessarily at 155, but let's be honest. Look at what we're doing with title shots nowadays. Cowboy Cerrone against Eddie Alvarez, I think, is a fight that sells. I think it's a fight that both mainstream and hardcores would give a fuck about, and that's really what's most important. Coming off of a TKO victory in round two, 2 minutes and 2 seconds, you mentioned the improved head movement, you mentioned the footwork. Really, Brandon Gibson is out there just actually teaching old dogs new tricks. You're talking about Donald Cowboy Cerrone, a guy who's nearly got 10 years in the game, a guy who, goes back to the WEC days, for Christ's sake. And kind of the book had been out on Cowboy, a guy who's an amazing Muay Thai fighter, didn't have the best wrestling, but, kind of stood up straight and would beat up guys who just came at him with straight boxing because he had really good use of timing and punched long. That has all kind of been shattered in this recent, run at 170 pounds. Now, he hasn't been fighting the same level of talent that he had been at 155 pounds when he had that run-up to the title, but I still think he's fighting very legit fighters and very dangerous guys. And more importantly, he's knocking them out or finishing them. Just really impressive stuff from Donald Cowboy Cerrone, and, egg on my face for not being on board and being on the team here. I think that the 155-pound title's next for him, or like you said, you got to find a good name for him at 170 pounds. I don't think you want to put him against the elite quite yet, because I think, there is, even if you do have the Conor fight next at 155 pounds, got some opportunity there in a backup with Donald.
Yeah, and for everyone that bet Rick's story tonight, look, take my advice on this. If Cowboy is not fighting a top 5 guy, bet on him. If he is, then, plan accordingly. But non-top 5 guys, there's no exceptions. Long-term, that's a winning strategy. It's been proven over and over and over again, and history repeats itself. Look at the books, man.
Check the record, bud. All right. All right. Before we had Rick's story against Donald Cowboy Cerrone, we had 2 last-minute replacements. Jesus Christ, it is a late night. For 2 very good fighters, or 2 really good fighters in the 170-pound division. Tim Means makes his return after his pseudo-drug suspension because of tainted supplements. Was supposed to have a much better fight. It escapes me right now exactly who he's supposed to be fighting, but gets a last-minute replacement from Sabiha Homasi, who was well overclassed in this fight. An unfortunate thing in my mind when a fight like this has to be kind of put together, but nice to see Tim Means back in the octagon and get a win. You kind of want to see him fight someone who's got something more going on.
I mean, it wasn't that, unfortunately, because I love watching, Tim Means beat the shit out of someone, so I got my money's worth on that. And also, how'd you get off calling him Sabia? There's no E or I in his first name.
Doug, we just mispronounce names wholesale in this podcast. We don't give a fuck anymore. Stop trying with Russian names shows ago. Japanese names, never once ever tried to pronounce one correctly. Now we're moving into like Eastern Bloc Europe. That's fucked. American names are next. You're fucked, dude. What is this guy? Like, what is Sabi?
Sabah Homasi, he's a Middle
Sabah
East.
Homasi? No, he's from Jersey.
If I had to make a bet, I think he's
Jerseyan.
Well, yeah, that's probably where he lives. We'll just leave it at that. But as far as the performance is concerned, man, I love Tim Means' hand fighting. He did something so cool in this fight where, Sabah Homasi stands from that orthodox position, and Tim Means is a southpaw. So Tim Means literally just grabbed Sabah Homasi's arms, wrist, so that Sabah couldn't block, and then he just went boom, straight left. And he kept doing that over and over. And I was screaming at my TV. I'm like a fucking armchair corner man. You know what I'm saying? I was screaming left high kick, because I wanted him to nail him with one of those. But hey, man, what he did worked, and the Dirty Bird is back. Not that he went anywhere, but the Dirty Bird is here to stay, my friends.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of Tim Means. Fantastic nickname, great style. Loves dirty elbows, is always in gritty fights. Just the type of guy who you want to be a fan of if you like the sport. Like seeing him maintaining that opening card status on the main card despite losing. his opponent, whom I'll look up in a bit. Someone who didn't,
Sean Strickland.
It's supposed to be Donald Strickland?
Sean Strickland.
Sean Strickland, because I was like, who's Donald Strickland? Sean Strickland, here it is right here. Yeah, that would have been a much better fight, but still a fight where I would have favored the man, Tim Means.
Well, that would have actually been a fight.
Yeah, it was kind of brutal. Did you think you could have stopped, if you were Hamas's corner, do you let that go out into the second round? It looked like he was getting the shit beat out of him at the end of the first.
Here's the thing, man. I need to know what kind of guy Sabah Homasi is, because some guy, like, for example, do you remember Bilal Muhammad versus Alan Jouban?
Oh, yeah. Vaguely?
It was an incredible fight where Bilal got dropped, like, 3-4 times in the first 2 rounds. And, people were saying it was over for him. But then he came back in the 3rd round and beat the shit out of Jouban. So it's one of those situations where the corner is trying to give him every opportunity possible. And luckily enough, the ref had enough sense in him to stop the fight while he was still standing, before Homasi went unconscious. So in this particular spot, I think it was a just stoppage.
Yeah, absolutely. Another person who had a late replacement who didn't fare so well, the ace, Hyun Goon Lim. He got smoked. He got starched out there by a very, very flashy Platinum Mike Perry. What did you think about Platinum Mike here? Because seems kind of like a douchebag. Honestly, come out there with the nickname Platinum Mike. Had clearly a lot of swagger, but lived up to it really in a big way. And Lim known as a guy who kind of can be a little reckless on his feet, and Perry took huge advantage of it.
Look, man, if you can knock out Hyung-Yu Lim in the first round, be as fucking cocky as you want. Like, I don't give a shit. Yesterday I was kind of like, the whole handshake thing, kind of unsportsmanlike.
It was really stupid, too. It seemed childish.
Here's the thing, man. Sportsmanship. Look, like I said earlier, if you're saying, if you cross the line and say, like, racial stuff, then I'll really have
That's the line for you.
That's the line for me. Or, you fucking hit a girl or something. If you do shit like that, then I have a problem. But him, doing the little fucking hand gesture, big deal. They get to solve it in the cage the next day, and Hyung-Yu Lim can hit him as hard as he wants to make him pay for that. So I really don't see what the big deal is. And, hey, this motherfucker went out there and knocked out Hyung-Yu Lim in the first round. Now I'm going to make a comment here. I have a theory, and this is only based on the fight that I saw tonight, that maybe Neil Magny took a lot out of Hyung-Yu Lim, because I've never seen Hyung-Yu Lim go down like that. And that's not to discredit the power of Mike Perry, because coming into this fight, all his wins were via first-round knockout. So either he's just that good, or it's a mixture of his knockout power with the fact that Lim is declining a little bit. The 5-round war with Tarek, plus the Neil Magny fight that I mentioned.
Yep, there's a lot of miles on that tread. Lim always a guy who's maybe too tough for his own good, so maybe that chin is fading, and we're seeing kind of Mike Perry reap the benefits of that. But Mike Perry, undefeated fighter, finishes in the first round for all of his fights, moving into the UFC, doesn't fight any scrub. You're not fighting a scrub here. You're fighting a guy who has a decent name, a guy who's known for being a tough son of a bitch, a guy who's known for being a wild son of a bitch. You go out there, you handle your business like that, starch him, you don't take any damage, you cut a pretty sweet promo for yourself at the end there. I don't know how you do a UFC debut much better than what Platinum Mike Perry did, though.
Oh, yeah, no question about it, because when you beat, not just beat, but emphatically defeat a guy like Hyung-Yu Lim, and you knock him out in the first round, something that Tarek Safdien couldn't do, something that took Neil Magny longer to do, and Neil Magny had to go through some shit before he could do that. Mike Perry was basically, he took a punch or two. It's a fist fight. You're going to get hit, right? Yeah. But overall, he came out clean. He was all good. He just wiped off his face with a towel, and now he's probably eating pizza. So
last week's sparring was worse for him.
So if you get a first-round knockout over a guy like Hyung-Yu Lim, they're not going to give you a can in your next fight. They're going to give you someone serious, because Hyung-Yu Lim is a pretty fucking serious fighter. So there's a lot of possibilities. Man, the name Alan Jouban keeps coming to my mind, but the thing is, I really want to see Alan Jouban versus Colby Covington, because, look, Colby Covington, with his wrestling, he's relentless, he's unbelievable. But I want to see a dude that can stuff the takedowns, and I want to see how Colby handles a real striker that doesn't give a fuck, that's going to throw big head kicks, that's going to throw big punches. If you want to clinch up, he's going to throw knees, and knows, everyone knows that Colby's coming in for that wrestling. But a guy like Juban, he can utilize that footwork, utilize that experience, and potentially knock out Colby Covington, or at least take him to a serious war. I want to see Colby be challenged, because these last couple dudes, look, fucking Jonathan Menuet and Max Griffin, much respect to them. I'm sure they'll go on to have success in their careers. But at this point, Colby needs to fight better dudes. But then again, I understand, when he stepped up against Warley Alves, he got tapped out right away. But Warley Alves is a scary individual as well.
Yeah, I wonder if a guy like Alan Juban can stop the wrestling in the takedowns of Colby Covington. He looks like, while maybe it didn't show in this fight just because there's such a discrepancy in the two levels of wrestling there, it looks like he could probably bring a lot to that department that maybe Juban can't handle. I'd much rather see Juban fight a guy like Mike Perry. That seems like a matchup that has fireworks all over it. I think that, though, you might want to slow roll Mike Perry. He seems like a cool guy. He seems like a guy who could have some swagger. I don't know how old Mike Perry is. He's Wikipedia pageless probably right now.
Tell me what you think about this. I know this is a huge step up in competition.
Go for it.
But tell me what you think about this stylistic matchup. So we haven't seen Dong Young Kim in a while, and Dong Young Kim and Hyung Yu Lim are teammates.
Yes.
There's a backstory there.
Do it in Korea.
And to come into your UFC debut and knock out a guy like Hyung Yu Lim, who, like I said, went in there with Tarek, went in there with Neil. Hey, man, Dong Young Kim's been out a while. Let's do Dong Young Kim versus Mike Perry. What do you think about that, Andrew?
That sounds really good, actually. And, has a built-in narrative. You could probably slide it in as a co-main event for a card that's happening around Korea. I know that they'd love to do something in Seoul right now. I don't know who's the star that you have lead that, but maybe it is.
Actually, they have a couple stars. It's funny because a lot of people shit on the Asian fighters in the UFC, but if you look closely to it, the Koreans are actually really fucking good. You got Doo-Ho Choi, the Korean Zombie.
Can you put Doo-Ho Choi in a fight night main event right now? The Korean Super Bowl, does he have enough hype on his name right now that you could put him into a Korean main event?
I'm going to say 5 words right now. Yair Rodriguez versus Actually, I think that might be 6 words, but point. I think you got my point.
The point was made, man. It's a great point too.
Yeah, that could headline any card. Look, if Bruce Leroy versus Rodriguez headline, and fuck, that was an amazing fight. I love that fight. Just think about the chaos. Taking an event to Korea, and you don't have to deal with the fucking Benson bullshit split decision. You get to deal with 2 guys that come to fucking fight and, throw down every time. And that's exactly what Doo-Ho Choi and Yair Rodriguez do, but they have such drastic styles. One guy's the precision puncher that sits dudes down, and the other guy is more flashy than Anthony Pettis. So that, to me, is the recipe for either knockout of the year or fight of the year. And I think, like you said, that should be the 5-round main event for UFC Korea.
Boom. Fantastic idea and fantastic matchup. We got to stop making UFC free money with our beautiful ideas and go back to breaking down the card for we'll go to the Fox Sports 1 section of the card. Cody Garbrandt really made a statement. TKO victory in the first round, 48 seconds, finishing off Takeo Mitsuzaki. Let's not forget, not so far ago did Mr. Dominic Cruz do a very similar thing to Takeo Mitsuzaki and set himself up for a title fight.
Listen, man, I don't want to discredit Cody Garbrandt because he's an amazing fighter. If you can knock out Thomas Almeida, you have my respect. But as a betting man, which is what I am, I'm looking to fade this guy. Not against Mizugaki, not against fucking Henry Briones, but, against a guy like John Lineker, against someone, because look, man, even though Cody has that serious power, he comes to fight, he leaves a lot of openings. He's chinny. I don't care what anyone says. Go to YouTube, type in Gerald Hodge versus Cody Garbrandt. Tell me he's not chinny. And even tonight. So look, his whole thing was, well, I knocked out Mizugaki faster than Cruz did. Correct. You did by like 20 seconds. However, Cruz didn't get touched
Touched
once
at all.
in that fight. And
The
Cody,
ankle pick. That's what took him so long. He had to hit the ankle pick, bro.
Cody, sorry to break it to you, bud, but you wobbled a little bit in tonight's 48-second knockout win. And it is what it is, man. And if you wobble like that against John Lineker, you're going to get knocked out, man. And look, this isn't me talking shit about a fighter because Cody Garbrandt could jab me and knock me out cold. I get it, man. I'm not some fucking, I get it, bro. Like, it is
goes
what
without saying that Cody Garbrandt can knock dudes like the fuck out.
We're fans of the sport. We like making money in the sport, so we have to find tendencies in fighters. I think Cody Garbrandt is open to getting knocked out. But with that said, much respect to him and all his success lately. He's been fucking killing it and doing his thing. So it's time for that step up, man. No more fucking around. So what I'm saying is these are my three options for Cody Garbrandt: Dominic Cruz, TJ Dillashaw, or John Lineker. Nothing else.
There's no really other fights for him unless for some reason you get one of those three injured and the other two matched up against each other. I don't really see a reason for you to spend Cody Garbrandt in that division. He's got some name. He's got some hype. Let's get him involved in some of these bigger fights that we could do at 135 pounds. Give someone the rub or get him the rub into a title shot. I think a title shot for him right now would actually be the best move if you're looking for a financial point of view for you at UFC. I know that a lot of people, might think that he doesn't deserve it quite yet. Maybe needs one more matchup, but I think he's got a really good marketable look, and he seems to have a fan base like outside of the bubble. And if you could bring fans from outside of typical UFC watchers into buying pay-per-views, that's the business the UFC's in. Make it $60 a head on people who normally wouldn't be purchasing, and I think that's an important part to note when we look at this division.
No doubt, and I say this every single time I'm on before the bald man speaks. Jimmy Rivera is the guy you need to look out for.
He has a very big matchup against Faber.
Dude, I hope odds makers aren't listening to this, but. We're gonna hammer the fuck out of Jimmy Rivera in that fight. I think there's a slight chance he opens as the dog, but hey, give me minus 125.
There's a very good chance he ends up being the dog at some point, just because you see so much outside money falling on someone like Faber. Dude. And the guy's got a hand speed advantage and probably a power advantage. Definitely a power advantage, but probably a hand speed.
And the thing I like about him so much is he's experienced. This is some fucking spring chicken who needs to get welcomed and get that ass whooping out the way. This is a guy that's had those ass whoopings and overcame, and in the regional scene fought UFC vets. I mean, he's fucking 19-1. He is the guy that you need to look out for. The two guys that I think are going to be the world champions, I'll actually name three. I'm going to go with Jimmy Rivera, John Lineker, and I think that Thomas Almeida can rebound and have a lot of success. But let's put Thomas Almeida on the back burner because he is coming off a devastating loss. Yeah. Jimmy Rivera and John Lineker, those are the two guys that you need to look out for right now in the bantamweight division, and I would pick them both over Cody Garbrandt.
I would too. I think that a guy like John Lineker fades to someone with the extremely great footwork like Dominic Cruz. John Lineker could get that title shot and steal it from Cody Garbrandt just because there is a lot of hardcore excitement around John Lineker. I just don't see how he sells outside of the bubble, and I think that the UFC is going to be looking at dollars and cents when it comes to its title fights, and it's going to be looking for any opportunity it can to really put together a pay-per-view style card, even if they have to marry two title fights into one pay-per-view to make that happen.
Well, here's my comment to that, Andrew.
Yeah.
You're 100% correct. However, I want to give the UFC credit for taking those necessary steps to bring him to that spotlight, because now he already headlined his first UFC event, which was on Fox Sports 1, and now he's about to headline his second against John Dodson. So he goes out there and gets that victory. That's 2 main event wins. That's a lot of eyes. And when you win in the kind of fashion that John Lineker wins in, I don't give a fuck
people tend to remember
if he speaks English or not. People want to see guys like that. And plus, he doesn't even need to learn English. Look, just say a couple phrases like, I
love my bitches.
You know what I mean? I killed Don Cruz, and we're all good, man. That's all you got to fucking say. That's one of my problems with Aldo, because Aldo's so incredible and as a fighter, and I also know he speaks perfect English because I've spoken to him before, and I've seen him speak perfect English on behind-the-scenes footage.
Breaking news, Dan Levy.
It's one of those things where it's like he's got that pride where he doesn't want to show that side of him. He wants to be, to him, it's, you know, it's gangsta to only speak in fucking Portuguese, which, hey, man, I respect you, whatever. But if we're talking about marketability in dollars like you were talking about, then you got to take that approach. And I think John Lineker is taking that approach because in his last fight, I forgot who it was that he called out, but let's say it was Dominic Cruz, but he was like, Dominic Cruz, IUKU. Like, that right there, that's all you need.
Done. Over.
Plus knocking out Michael McDonald in the first round. I think John
like a madman
is going to be the guy, but look out for Jimmy Rivera when he fights Uriah Faber.
Absolutely. Before we move on, we'll just say we started off talking about this fight saying that Cody Garbrandt is a guy to look to fade. And if you keep looking to fade him, eventually when he catches that L, we're going to get a good price. Opened up in the market here at -400, closed at around a 525 price. So a lot of people hammering that, a lot of people throwing that in the parlay fodder. So be looking for a really nice price on your fade plant, Cody Garbrandt. Raquel Pennington beat Elizabeth Phillips. This fight was ranked an F and shall not be discussed. Next fight. Artem Lobov beat Chris Avila, which it was not a fight that deserved to be in the UFC. I will mention it because I did ask people to write haikus to celebrate what an awesome fight this was between Artem Lobov and Chris Avila. And we did have someone write us a poem. You ready for this, Daniel? Otis, at @high_light, wrote this haiku. Artem Avila, terrible fighting tonight. Deep Chinese regrets. Fantastic work from Otis there. Thank you for contributing to our poetry contest. Pure artistry from Mr. Lobov today. Need we say anything, or is it just a given that this guy really isn't a UFC caliber fighter?
Well, you know, like we said earlier, it was the diet version of what McGregor did. It was like
zero. There was 0 calories in that partaking of it.
It was like McGregor light. You know what I'm saying?
He was doing exactly what McGregor might do, but at being non-effective at it.
Well, what's the name of that the fake sugar that people use because they want to be
Splenda.
More? It was the Splenda Stevia McGregor. You know what I'm saying? And look, man, I'm happy for him to get that victory. He's 12-12 jobber. But you know what? He got his arm raised one time in the octagon, so I'm happy for him, man. What happens next is either Jim Ehlers or Cole Miller, because those are the two worst fighters at 145 pounds. No disrespect, once again. You know, Augusta win, and I would do the chicken dance if I were ever to fight them. But we analyze these fights objectively, and those are the fights to make.
I love the Cole Miller fight just because it's reminiscent of that old school fight that happened, or that was supposed to happen about 1.5 years ago in Dublin. Fantastic matchmaking. But I will not get suckered into breaking down an Artem Lobov fight. I'm going to stick to my guns and move on. Courtney Casey beating Ronda Marcos, the pride of Canada, the best female MMA fighter from the Great White North. Courtney Casey, gritty fighter, had a bit of a potty mouth in the post-fight interview, but definitely got the armbar victory, secured it in the first round near the end at 4 minutes and 34 seconds. You got to give her props because she knew that she could grit out a victory and kind of got it done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's cool about Courtney Casey is win or lose, she comes to fight. So correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't she win performance bonuses in her first 3 fights? And then tonight, she also had a first-round finish. So, you know, if it wasn't for Rumble and for Lorenz Larkin, she would also be getting a bonus. I mean, I haven't heard the official bonuses yet, but if I were making them, you know, it'd obviously be Rumble, Lorenz Larkin, and McGregor Diaz. So, but you know what? They're going to be taking care of Courtney Casey, you know, under the table. Yeah. You know, you went out there.
G's, 20 G's in Courtney Casey's pocket right now.
Random Marcos in the first round, you know, here's a nice dinner at the Vegas Strip. You know what I'm saying? She's gonna get a nice. she's gonna get a nice little envelope in 3 weeks for sure.
She got comped at strip steak. It's all good.
Oh yeah, there's no question about that.
Yeah. Courtney Casey, Colin Bardsley said it really good in that. Courtney Casey's a girl who is just good enough to be really good at 135 pounds. Meaning, like, it doesn't take a lot to be floating around the top 10. And that's really where this girl belongs, because she's an actual fighter. She's someone who shows up to get it done, to get finishes. And that's why I'm going to salute Courtney Casey. Moving right along to the UFC Fight Pass featured preliminary bout between Lorenz Larkin and Neil Magny. A bit of a shocker-ish, depending on how you saw this line move. Neil Magny loses and falls to Lorenz Larkin, TKO, first round. Lorenz Larkin just flat out the better kickboxer, and just hammered that leg, kind of foreshadowing what we were going to see in the main event tonight.
This is the Lorenz Larkin that I've been waiting to see for such a long time. I mean, he's always showed those glimpses that, of brilliance, back when he beat Robbie Lawler, even back in his Strikeforce fights, when he fought Scott Lighty, I think it was at heavyweight or light heavyweight, you've always seen those flashes of brilliance. And then, in his current streak where he knocked out Santiago Ponzinibbio, goes to a very, very, highly contested fight with Jorge Masvidal, the two-men-off fight. He's really finding his own, man. And tonight, that was the best Lorenz Larkin that we have ever seen. I mean, the utilizations of the kicks. It wasn't just the leg kicks. It was the kicks to the calf, and then he'd knock him down with those push kicks. And then when it was time to finish him, man, he finished him with that beautiful elbow. And there's no question in my mind that not only is he getting the $50K bonus, but also this was the last fight on Lorenz Larkin's contract. And if you ever need bargaining power, some guys they wanna re-sign before the fight because either they're not confident enough that they're gonna win the fight, or they just want to see what happens, right? Or excuse me, they just want to be they want that security to be locked in right away. Now other guys like Lorenz Larkin, he was like, man, fuck this. I'm going to go out there, give it everything I got, and if I get a great result, I'll get even more money. And not only did he get a great result, he got a spectacular result. To finish Neil Magny in the first round, I mean, one has never done that, right? Mike Ricci did back in Tough,
doesn't count.
Back when Neil Magny was learning his craft. But this Neil Magny, a Magny that beat Gastelum, that beat Hector Lombard, that beat Hyung Yu Lim, that beat all those top guys, and for him to get stopped by Lorenz Larkin, like I said, finally Lorenz Larkin rose to to his potential and showed everything that he's got. And now I think that if he continues this momentum, pushes it forward, do you think he's a future champion if he keeps fighting like that, dude? Because he just needs to be consistent. I know that sometimes in fights in the later rounds, he does fade. He does kind of back himself into the wall. But tonight, he was up against the guy with the longest reach in that division's history, an 8-inch reach. He had zero problems closing that distance. He didn't take any punches as far as I remember. And he completely owned a guy that you don't just completely own. No one walks through Neil Magny. Even Damian Maia, he did really great, but he submitted him in the second round. But this was different. This is the kind of beating that Neil Magny took that, he'll probably go to the hospital afterwards. The Damian Maia one was just a grappling clinic. He was probably out partying that night. Neil Magny is not partying right now, I'll tell you that. And Lorenz Larkin, he'll be partying with some 50 G's. They might even give him something else because that was absolutely phenomenal.
It was really a really great fight. Just like Damian Maia did with his win over Neil Magny, Lorenz Larkin gets to kind of take a shortcut in the rankings here because, Magny, with just his almost Pac-Man-like desire to just consume fights in the UFC and just taking over a lot of victories, Lorenz Larkin gets the rub by beating a guy who beat the guy for a lot of really high-quality fighters. You mentioned the Kelvin Gastelum win. That's a fight I think that Lorenz Larkin could struggle in potentially because of the grappling aspect. But he's such a superior kickboxer that if they can maintain a stand-up battle, or if he can fight someone who might have some grappling potential, but not the greatest takedowns or the greatest setup to takedowns, and could really, play the distance game much better than his opponent, Larkin's going to be very successful. There's a lot of people in the top 5 that he could give a very good fight to right now. will he get into the position where he's able to fight for the welterweight, top 10 and in that position? I think he earned the right to a top 15 fight now. It's all going to depend on matchups from here on for him. And we still have to answer a lot of questions on his grappling. Maybe there was a couple attempts at the takedown, but I didn't see anything really, game plan specific based to neutralize Lorenz Larkin with a great wrestling offense in this fight. And that's what I think he could be very susceptible to.
Well, I mean, when you're getting your legs kicked out like that,
that's a different thing.
There's nothing you can do about it. It's like he completely immobilized him. It was really more what Lorenz did than what Neil Magny didn't do. It just wasn't his night. It's like taking a knife to a gunfight. That's exactly what it was, man. And he paid the price. But, Neil Magny will be back, man. He's a warrior. He's as resilient as they come. To get knocked out by Mike Ricci, to lose to fucking Seth Baczynski, to have that close fight with John Manley, then all of a sudden you win 9 of your last 10, barring tonight's fight. He's an absolute badass. He's a winner. He'll return. But Lorenz Larkin, tonight was the first time that we saw this dude could be a world champion.
Exactly. I think we found out that Lorenz Larkin has a special talent for the striking arts in mixed martial arts and could be a force to reckon with, and he's a phenomenal athlete. I think that Neil Magny doesn't lose much of his shine. I think the appeal of a guy like Neil Magny is that he's going to take a lot of fights. He's going to beat up guys that you don't expect him to beat up. But this was a recalibration, I think, for a lot of people, and especially the odds makers who had installed him as the favorite. They put Lorenz Larkin at a 135 number and it ended up closing at a 115. So some people were pretty smart, grabbing themselves some underdog money with Lorenz Larkin. We referred to it earlier. Colby Covington put on a clinic against Max Griffin. Just not too compelling of a fight, getting a stoppage TKO victory in the third round at 2 minutes and 18 seconds. Colby Covington, in a guy or in a card where there was a lot of 170-pound fighters, does he have a future in this division? He looked great, but the competition is what the competition was.
I said it once, and I'll say it before. Let Alan Jouban tame the wrestler.
I like that. I think you got to do something like that against these guys with really wrestle-heavy approaches who can kind of eat through entry-level UFC talent. Let him fight someone with some sprawl and brawl tactics, see how that goes for him. Before that, we had the curtain jerker between Marvin Vettori and Alberto Uda. This is a fight I completely missed, but it seemed that Marvin Uda got a submission in round 1 at 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Did you watch this fight? Did he get the sub off his back? What happened?
Yeah, I actually thought Uda was going to win the fight. I thought he was going to use his clinch, and he was doing pretty good. He got top position. And then as soon as he got reversed, he got in a very tight guillotine. The dude didn't even have a full guard. He basically had a half guard and got tapped from the guillotine. But
Great.
Hey, props to Vettori, and we'll see what he does next. Yeah,
it's a weird division. It's weird to be in that spot. There's a lot of guys floating around that position. It's a fun division, but when you get to those lower ranks where the names kind of get nameless, the best you can hope for is something like this, a fun, fast finish, and maybe the potential of a fighter evolving from this fight. All right, UFC 202, the MMA card of leg kicks, the Revenge of Ireland, Dublin's comeback. What do you rank it? You're gonna give it? Oh no! First, we got to give out the fight of the night in our performance of the night. So let's give our performance of the night. So you got to give 2. You're Joe Silva. Give 50 G's out to 2 people out here for really great performances. Who do you got?
Listen, my picks for my awards, they are non-debatable, but
okay, they are yours.
If anyone wants to debate them with me at Best Fight Picks on Twitter, I seriously don't think you will pick better awards than I will. And if the UFC does, I might have to call up the. Wait, are they still Zuffa, or is it someone else's headquarters now?
It's now officially LA headquarters, WME.
I'm gonna hit up them dudes at WME because Rumble Johnson, Lorenz Larkin, Conor McGregor, and Nate Diaz should all be taking home 50K bonuses. They should all be taking home fucking 950K bonuses. But since the protocol is 50K bonus, those are the 4 guys, no questions asked.
Yeah, it's absolutely absurd in a professional sport, especially a league that sold for $4 billion, that we, encourage performance based on paying someone 50,000 paltry dollars. I give my performance of the bonuses out nonetheless to Mr. Rubble Johnson over with his only true KO of the night in the first round, 13 seconds. You just can't get a better finish than that. And I think you give another one to Mr. Cody Garbrandt for his fast finish of Takeo Mitsuzaki. Those are 2 guys that you're clearly trying to push. I think it's always nice to give them a quick honor of KO of the night for those 2 guys. My fight of the night, of course, is Conor McGregor against Nathan Diaz. Potential fight of the year, we'll see. There's about 4 months left. We'll see if he can hold up. But right now, it's edging in my 1 spot. Maybe that's just because it just happened. But I think that Mr. Robbie Lawler has lost his spot with fight of the year, and now it is firmly in the hands of Mr. Diaz and Mr. Conor McGregor. All right, Dan, give the people a grade for this card, A to F. The card as a whole, the undercard, the fight press, prelims, the pay-per-view, the very exciting main event. What do you give it? How was Tonight Fights?
I give it an A.
Boom. I'm a
A. The only reason I'm not giving it an A+ is because with UFC 189, that was an A+ just because when that was over, like, I wanted to watch it again. It was like
the bar was set very high.
Like, changed my life or some shit. But tonight was a solid A, and man, we got a fight of the year contender and a knockout of the year contender with Rumble, and then Lorenz Larkin doing what he did, Cowboy Cerrone, fucking this new guy Mike Perry, Tim Means, dude, it was badass. That was an A.
Yep, absolutely an A in my book as well. That A+ is really now reserved for those really special nights, those singular moments in the sport that kind of sum up everything that we love. And I keep going back to it. That 1-2 combo of Robbie Lawler against Rory McDonald, and then Conor McGregor knocking out Jose Aldo. I don't think I'll ever relive a card that quite put me on the edge of the seat like that. This is an A, though. This is a spectacular night at the fights. This is a pay-per-view that you show a mainstream audience to get people interested in the sport of MMA. I think that, for a sport that embarrasses itself quite frequently and falls on its face, this is a good night for us. And despite some of the antics in the lead up to this fight, we showed ourselves to be a really good, elegant, and very entertaining sport. Fantastic main event and just a really good time. So it's an A in my book. Dan, thanks for coming on the show, brother. We ran a little bit late, but I'm giving you this time. Tell the people where to find you. Tell them about the website, but mostly tell them about Half the Battle, my man. Floor's yours.
Well, firstly, my man, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on the show, brother. I fucking love talking the fights with you, and tonight was one of those special nights where, we're going to look back on and we're going to remember where we were when UFC 202 happened. When I was a kid, I don't remember how old, but under 10 years old for sure. I remember when Holyfield fought Tyson. That was that big fight feel. I remember when Tyson fought Lennox Lewis. Tonight was one of those nights, and you're going to remember where you were where Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor rematched. And hopefully you remember where you were the first time they fought too. I don't know if I do right now, but no, I'm just kidding, man. But I definitely will remember this for the rest of my life. Now, as far as following me is concerned, if you are interested in following me, you can go to Best Fight Picks on Twitter at Best Fight Picks. You can go to bestfightpicks.com. I make plays on fights. I'm up for the year and shit. Even though I lost tonight, which, listen, the money I lost tonight, the fights alone were worth it. So I'm totally content with that. Plus, there's a long-term game anyways. My podcast, Half the Battle, that's what it's called, Half the Battle. You can find it on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. And there's 2 things we do. Interview the most exciting fighters on planet Earth and ask them the questions that no one else asks, and break down the fights, give the bets, and I always have very sharp guests. You know, last week I had my boy James Vick, Mike Biggie Rhodes, Sean Carey. I'm always stacking the lineups. I'm working till 5 a.m. every night trying to be the best I can be at this. And I love you guys. Thank you so much for your support. Andrew, peace out, my brother.
Thank you, Dan. Always appreciate your input, and we do appreciate everything you do to bring us the best analysis in the sport. A big thank you, really, to the live viewers tonight, staying up late with us, 2 a.m. in the Eastern Time Zone. Y'all are always awesome sticking with us, watching this show when it happens live. Before the Bald Man Speaks really doesn't happen without our audience, so a huge thank you to you. UFC 202, wrap it in. It's in the books. Peace out.